think you probably know, my whole career around teaching the Dharma really started in working in addiction with teenagers, and which I really miss. I actually am honest. If I'm honest, I'm quite dismissive of all of that kind of segment of the world, mostly because if my mind starts thinking about addiction and the state of addiction and the problems with addiction and trauma, especially currently now, I just fucking get depressed. So I a little bit stick my head in the sand around it. Also, me and my wife talk about it sometimes, is actually how disappointed we are that Buddhism or Dharma practice didn't quite make the impact on that world as we thought it was going to do. Many years ago, Shannon and I were involved with refuge recovery and started opening some retreat centers or treatment centers, and really getting excited about how we were going to bring the Dharma to the addiction space. And if you look at the state of that kind of Buddhist recovery world now, it's kind of a colossal failure. Which, I'm really kind of, if I'm honest, I'm really kind of insanely disappointed about that. Because as we look at our society right now, we can bitch and moan and complain and think about all the problems we have about this, that, and the other thing. But I think from a really fundamental, especially from a Buddhist perspective, really the primary problem that we have is addiction, which is the source of all the other problems that we have. And I was listening, I put it in the chat, there's a great podcast from this guy, Scott Galloway, it's a short one, about what they call the addiction economy now, which is like kind of a dire. So, trigger warning, beware if you listen to it. It's not a positive message, but it's a very realistic message, and it's a little bit of an eye-opener. For years, because of Silicon Valley and the internet and Facebook and all these insanely destructive fucking algorithms that are totally designed to hijack your attention. Does anybody ever get their attention hijacked from an app on your phone? Right? That's not by mistake. Some turbo nerd with, some trigonometry nerd, in some room in Silicon Valley are sitting around trying to figure out how to hijack your attention. And you know what? They fucking won. They won. The attention economy is over. The attention economy is over, and we lost. Welcome to the addiction economy. They're not trying to get your attention anymore. They already have it. They own it. And so this manifests as this kind of, addiction, and that fuels really everything. And so when we look, and I talk to people in the addiction treatment world, which I try not to do because it bums me out, it's getting worse. Actually, we thought we were moving the needle at one point, maybe in the early 2000s, but now when we look at it, it's just getting worse. And first of all, there are a couple reasons. First of all, the delivery system. You used to have to go to a dangerous neighborhood to get drugs. That shit's not true anymore. People don't even do drugs anymore. Fentanyl, a lot of these synthetic drugs. People don't. I feel bad for the heroin dealer, man. He's out of business. He's been out of business for a long time. And it's not even drug addiction's one thing, but it's just the whole. The American mind, the modern mind, the cognitive mind, the collective cognitive mind is already addicted. Whether it's to devices or to shit food or to wherever you go, it's the delivery system. It's just everywhere now. It's like we're swimming in the water at this point. And I try not to think about it too much, but lately it's been on my mind for a couple of reasons. The main reason is I've been in conversation with this woman who works at in Anchorage at the state of Alaska. I actually just this week signed a contract with the state of Alaska to come up there in May and do to present at a conference and do a really rigorous clinical training on a program that I have called Mindfulness East, which integrates mindfulness practice with emotional intelligence. And hopefully this will happen more. I did it for a long, long time, and I just it kind of dried up around the pandemic, and I haven't tried to get back in. But I'm actually at the moment pretty excited about this program, because one of the things that I noticed this is a very secular Dharma thing for me, but having come from 12-step, some clinical training, and really Buddhism, and then working at a Buddhist-based treatment center and looking at the whole kind of a reality of addiction and trauma from a global view, trying to be like, okay, what's really going on? I think where Buddhism thrives in that space is not like starting, you know, recovery communities as has been tried, but actually really trying to bring Buddhist practices into rigorous clinical curriculum. So this emergence of what we know from EMDR therapy and different forms of trauma therapy and internal family systems therapy, like the Western world has got a lot of great fucking addiction trauma programs. The problem is nobody can afford them. So we have all these wonderful programs that nobody can fucking have access to. So that's a problem. And then when you bring a contemplative component, such as mindfulness and some Buddhist practices, into the clinical world, you get this kind of beautiful mixture of the two, which is what I've been interested in for a long, long time. In the last couple of years, mostly because of the pandemic, it just kind of fell by the wayside. So I'm excited about that now, because I don't think that we have a mental health crisis. I think we have an emotional health crisis. And it's what gets addicted? Like, what gets addicted? Well, it's the attention that gets addicted. And this is sort of like, so the good news is that mindfulness, Buddhist meditation, in essence, is a attention training program. That's the most fundamental cognitive factor in the mind. It's the whole goddamn thing that, the Buddha was onto this. He's like, you gotta train this thing, or someone, if you don't own it, somebody else is gonna, or you're gonna give it away. It's your ultimate inner resource, attention. And so the interesting thing about that is, if you look at Dan Goleman's work in particular, he's been onto this for 30 years. Nobody seems to be interested, even though his book was a New York Times bestseller. Attention is what regulates emotion. Right? If you want to regulate your emotion, if you want to emotionally regulate, the way that's done is capturing, harnessing attention. It's like, really? Wow, that's interesting. And so that's how we emotionally regulate, is by training the attention. And the way that the addiction apparatus works is that when the attention becomes hijacked by external whatever forces, and then what happens is what it does is you're opening the garage door. You're basically letting them into your heart, for lack of a better word. And then we become affected. We get angry. We get scared. We get shamed. And once we talk about them hacking into our phones, right? Like TikTok, all the shit that's going on right now. Like they say, if the product, if you have an app and the product is free, you are the product. So if you think your Facebook app is free, any app that you download for free, you're the product, because they're getting into your information. And not only are they getting into your information, they're also getting into your heart. They're getting into your emotion. They're making you scared. They're making you angry. They're making you upset, right? And so that becomes very dysregulating. But we have to realize the window in is attention. And the good news is you have a tremendous amount of agency over this. I mean, this is really, it's the irony is not actually humorous at all. That this is actually exactly what the Buddha was saying in so many words. Watch out what your attention happens. And one thing that happens in Dharma spaces currently that I think is a nice message, but it kind of pisses me off. There's lots of classes, and I think there's even a book, and there's lots of themes in the insight tradition that says, our heart was made for this. Like all the stuff that's going on in the world right now, that we were made for this. Like we have all this resilience and all this ability, and that might be true, but I think that's really kind of bullshit. I think that's actually kind of almost, it just makes me feel worse. It's like, so that way, if I have somehow been corrupted, that it somehow is my fault and I should have known better. And I was made for this. We weren't made for this. We weren't made for anything. I think we have to be real honest about that. Nobody wants to be real honest about the fact that the Buddhist assessment of the kind of cognitive, emotional, ethical system is it's all potential. We were made for horrible atrocities as much as we were made. We were made for anything. You know, obviously, have you watched the news lately? Obviously, we're not fucking made for this. We're made to be addicted by this, probably more likely. You know, is that we're very vulnerable. We're very vulnerable. We're easily conditioned. We're easily influenced. You know, and so they've figured it out. They have a digital algorithm. They know how to hack your system. Happens to me all the time. You know, I'm always eating shit, buying shit, looking at shit that I know is fucking bad for me while I'm doing it in real time going, I think this is kind of bad for me. I probably should put this down. You know, I'm already addicted. Right? And I don't say that as kind of like, I don't want that to be disempowering. I just want to be honest. You know, I think that's really the hard thing is nobody wants to be honest about this, that it's already happened. You're already addicted. And so, you know, I don't think that we were made for this, but I think that, you know, now is, if there was ever a time to take your practice really fucking seriously, like really seriously, it's right now. Right now. You know, this is the time to sit more, to really kind of, in a way, I think that emotionally, the only way that I can think about it, the only way that actually helps me get anything done is constructive anger. You know, anger gets a really bad reputation in the recovery world that I come from. Resentment, the number one offender, you know. If you're a man and you get involved in AA and Dharma practice, you hear anger, resentment, hatred, okay, being upset, being angry, whatever is just bad and wrong, and that's totally ineffective. That becomes destructive. You can have not enough anger. Not enough anger. An anger deficit can be as destructive as an anger of being hyper anger. So I always find if every time, and I'm always in there now, especially for me, the big one is food. The only way that I've ever been able to overcome destructive behaviors is just getting really fucking pissed at them. Like that's what got me sober. Anything I've ever overcome that was really, really challenging started by me just getting honest with myself and being and just admitting defeat, being like, I've lost. This thing fucking owns me. It owns me. You know, and getting mad enough, angry enough to be like, all right, like, I'm going to try anyway. You know, I'm going to try anyway. And I'm going to fail, and I'm going to try, and I'm going to fail, and I'm going to try. And really, like, when you sit for 20 minutes, what happens? You fail, and then you try. You fail. It's like, that's it. It's like, we just need to fail better. I mean, I've been sitting for 30 years. I don't think I've ever sat for 20 minutes once ever in 30 years where I was able to stay present the whole time. Ever. No way. Maybe, you know, once or twice, right? Like on a retreat or something. But again, it's that, and it's classic mind training. We sit, we watch, we hearken, we watch the mind become swept away or engaged in some kind of habit pattern, whatever it might be, that's a little bit destructive, that we know that's not very good for us. We know we don't want to foster this. We don't want to encourage that. We recognize that and we go, okay, and then we kind of reset. Are you familiar with this instruction? You know, that should be applied across the board towards everything. You're going to fail. You're already a failure. You know, that's okay. That's honest, actually. That's one thing I love about working with people in the substance abuse field. It's like there's a joke we used to say, like, people like substance abuse counselors are the most motivated group of losers on the planet. Because it's like, at best, we're going to help like 8% of the people. We're like, come on, let's rally. It's like, it's a wonderful thing because there are people out there who still are in it for the right reasons and are in it for trying to do something meaningful about this. And so when you really kind of zoom into the present moment, I think it's really important. Like I said, now, if you really, if there was ever a time to really practice with some diligence and seriousness, it's now. And probably the main job, the main project that I'm in all the time is just watching and babysitting my attention. What am I paying attention to? What is the consequence of this? Do I want more of this? Right? Because when you look at, John Vervaeke's work, I've been on him for a while. He's got these things called the meaning crisis, and I think that we're in one. I think addiction is tied to that. What is at the root of addiction? Life is meaningless. There's no point. I'm a loser. It's all bad. It's all a meaningless universe. I might as well just get high till eternity. I mean, addiction is meaninglessness on steroids, right? And so when we pay attention to one thing, whatever I'm paying attention to, like right now, you guys are paying attention to me at the expense of ignoring everything else, which is actually a lot of stuff, right? And so, like off the cushion, I'll notice too, like once in a while, I'll have a day where I'm like, I'm just going to like really, really try to sort of pay attention to what I'm paying attention to. Metacognition. And if I do that, and I do that sometimes, it can be really disappointing to be like, wow, like, man, like I get caught up in some stupid bullshit, like very easily. I can be like 23 minutes in to something on my phone, or it doesn't have to be on my phone, something in my head that probably got planted by my phone, right? And so, and the good news is not to bum everybody out here, because that's never my intention, but, this is actually totally doable. I think that's the great message of the Dharma. This is like, actually on some level, it's tragic, but it's also like, you can totally do this. You're doing it anyway. You're already doing it anyway. And it's just trying to be more immersed in that, more positive, more hopeful, and turning that thing around. And then when we look at the world, that which is really out there, I learned this I got compassion fatigue syndrome twice. The first time, I guess I didn't get the fucking message. I had to go back and get a little bit more. And that is this idea of if we get too caught up in like the world and these big systems, of politics and environment. Of course, there's a million things about the world to get really overwhelmed and pissed off about. Probably not a good idea. You getting angry and upset and pissed off about anything in the world helps zero people. Is that, the Dalai Lama, I remember reading his book, which is a great book if you haven't read it, called Beyond Religion. It's a book on secular ethics. And they ask him a lot, because he's kind of like the Buddhist Pope, right? They're like, well, how is it that we are going to change all these big systems of oppression in the environment and all these social political problems we have? How are we going to change those? And he says, you are not going to change those. That's impossible. It's one person at a time, And that's maybe not the most, you think about that, like, I don't know how much patience I have, but it's really, that's it. It's one person at a time. Starting with you, starting with the people that you encounter every day, and just trying to be that kind of positive change of kindness and awareness, positivity, however that word lands for you, constructive ways of looking at things. That's really the only way to do it. And also, too, that's a very against the stream approach, because the algorithm on the other side of your phone does not want you to be kind, does not want you to be present, does not want you to be stable. It's like an anti-dharmic algorithm, right? Addiction, which is probably highly linked to capitalism, which is, our economy. Whoever's in charge of that, whoever's on the other side of that, the last thing that they want, the biggest threat to all of that, is a population of content individuals. So if you really want to help, become a content individual. And that's probably the most globally aware thing that you can do to help other people, is to just cultivate contentment, purpose, meaning, happiness. Because it's very contagious. You ever run into somebody who's just really happy and doing well and they're in a good mood? If you can get over the envy, it's very contagious. We like those people, right? So let's pause there because I don't want to chew up all the time.